Welcome back to our comprehensive study of the Bachelor Remedies. Today, we are opening the door to one of the most profound, spiritually significant, and emotionally intense remedies in the entire compendium, sweet chestnut. Positions Positioned within Group 6, the remedies addressing despondency and despair. Sweet chestnut represents an emotional landscape that goes far beyond ordinary sadness. It's a remedy for the absolute limits of human endurance. In this masterclass, we will dissect its botanical signature, its psychological architecture, its sharp differentiations from surrounding remedies, and its clinical application in modern therapeutic practice. To understand sweet chestnut, we must first define its core emotional frequency. This is not the state of feeling blue, moody, or discouraged by life's daily setbacks. Sweet chestnut is indicated when the individual's psychological defenses have completely buckled under the weight of an unendurable agony. It is the archetype of the end of the road. Dr. Bach described this state as the ultimate trial of human consciousness. The moment where the dark night of the soul becomes so intense that the person feels their very spirit is about to shatter or dissolve into nothingness. When Dr. Bach discovered sweet chestnut in 1935, he was operating at the height of his spiritual and clinical sensitivity. He recognized that human suffering has various layers. While some remedies handle the everyday personality imbalances, Sweet Chestnut was brought forth to address a cosmic existential crisis. In his original notes, he emphasized that this remedy is for the moments when the mind or body feels it has reached the utmost limit of its capacity, and that nothing but destruction and annihilation seems left to face. The true mission of sweet chestnut is transmutational. It does not simply act as a mild emotional sedative, it acts as a spiritual breach. When the ego self has exhausted all of its internal resources, strategies, and defense mechanisms, it experiences a terrifying void. Sweet chestnut enters this exact psychological space, operating not just as a remedy for symptom relief, but as a catalyst for a profound identity shifting rebirth. As we established in our study of elm, the botanical signature of a plant offers a precise mirror to its therapeutic application. Let us look at Castanea sativa, the sweet chestnut tree. This is an ancient, incredibly majestic tree that can live for centuries, developing an immense, deeply furrowed trunk. The bark often displays a dramatic, spiraling pattern, twisting around the core of the tree as it grows. This physical twisting mirrors the intense internal twisting and wringing of the human soul when caught in the grips of sweet chestnut anguish. Notice the severe grooves in the bark that look like lines of immense tension, as if the tree itself is absorbing a massive crushing torque from the earth and elements. In human psychology, the sweet chestnut state feels exactly like this: an internal wringing, a twisting pressure, where the individual is being wrung out like a sponge by their emotional suffering. Yet look at the tree. Despite these deep agonizing lines etched into its physical body, it stands solid, surviving for generations. The structural core remains entirely intact. The flowers of the sweet chestnut tell a stunning story of transformation. In midsummer, long after most other trees have finished blooming, the sweet chestnut explodes into bursts of long, needle-like, golden-white catkins. They do not droop, they radiate outward violently into the surrounding space like rays of pure light bursting from the dark green foliage. This botanical timing and appearance signify the sudden radiant illumination that enters a person's life precisely when they think their season of hope has completely passed. Consider the fruit of the tree. The chestnut is encased in an incredibly sharp, prickly, spiky green husk or bud. It warns the world away, presenting a boundary of pure spikes. But if you open it, the inside is lined with a soft, velvety texture that protects the valuable nuts within. This reflects the psychological defense mechanism of the sweet chestnut state. The individual is wrapped in a painful, agonizing outer layer of suffering, intensely guarded and isolated, holding their vulnerable core hidden deep within an impenetrable shell of despair. For students and practitioners, a vital botanical distinction must be made. Do not confuse the sweet chestnut with the horse chestnut family. The horse chestnut gives us white chestnut for racing thoughts, chestnut bud for repeating mistakes, and red chestnut for anxiety over loved ones. The sweet chestnut, Castanea sativa, stands alone botanically and therapeutically. It produces simple, long, sharply serrated leaves and edible nuts. It does not deal with the mental loops of the mind, but rather with the foundational survival of the spiritual self. Let us dissect the psychopathology of the negative sweet chestnut state. This is an anatomy of total internal collapse. In an elm state, which we studied previously, the individual feels overwhelmed by their exterior duties but still fights to manage them. In a sweet chestnut, the fight is over. The individual has tried every single route, exhausted every option, applied every mental strategy, and made nothing but a brick wall. The psyche experiences a terrifying state of no exit, a profound emotional claustrophobia where there is nowhere left to turn. Crucially, the sweet chestnut individual rarely displays external hysteria, loud weeping, or dramatic attention seeking behaviors. Because they have reached the absolute limits of their agony is silent and deeply internalized. They may sit quietly in a room, answer questions in a flat, exhausted monotone, or go about their day behind a mask of hollow composure. They don't scream for help because they are utterly convinced that no help exists. The isolation is total. They feel trapped in an individual black hole where light cannot escape. Cognitively, sweet chestnut creates a profound narrowing of perception, a severe tunnel vision. The mind loses its capacity to think laterally or recall that life is cyclical. The individual suffers from what psychologists call temporal stagnation. The past feels like an illusion, and the future is perceived merely as an endless, agonizing continuation of current pain. The cognitive structures required to conceptualize relief or formulate a plan for recovery are completely offline, paralyzed by the sheer volume of existential suffering. When observing behavioral manifestations, watch for a total systemic withdrawal. The person pulls away from social interactions, not out of anger or resentment, but out of a lack of vital energy to engage. Their physical movements become muted, their gaze becomes hollow, and their voice may lose its prosody and inflection. They stop utilizing their normal coping strategies. They stop exercising, they stop journaling, and they stop attending therapy. It's a behavioral state of absolute surrender to the darkness. At its deepest layer, Sweet Chestnut is a crisis of faith. The individual experiences the illusion of cosmic abandonment. Whether they are consciously religious, spiritually inclined, or purely secular, they feel completely cut off from any supportive, higher framework. They feel that the universe is either entirely indifferent or actively hostile to their existence. This is the archetype of being utterly forsaken, left entirely alone in a dark, cold void where no higher power, no loving principle, and no luck can ever find them again. In clinical practice, misprescribing within group 6 is a common pitfall because despondency and despair can look identical on the surface. A client walking into your office crying or entirely numb could require any of these essences. As practitioners, it's our duty to perform a rigorous differential diagnosis, stripping away the surface behaviors to identify the exact quality of the internal suffering. Let us contrast sweet chestnut with its closest therapeutic neighbors. Let us look at the critical distinction between sweet chestnut and cherry plum. Cherry plum is characterized by acute tension and the terrifying fear of losing control of one's mind. The cherry plum individual feels like a boiling pressure cooker, terrified that they might snap, do something horrific, or go insane. Sweet chestnut is fundamentally different. There is no fear of an explosion because the explosion has already occurred internally. It is not an active fight against madness. It's a quiet, devastating endurance of an unendurable void. There is no impulse towards sudden violence. There is only the massive, heavy weight of total helplessness. Next, let us compare sweet chestnut with gorse. Gorse is an intellectualized form of hopelessness. A Gore's personality will sit in front of you and say, I have tried 5 doctors, none of them helped, there is no point. However, if a loved one pleads with a Gore's individual, they will reluctantly try a 6th doctor just to please them. Sweet chestnut is vastly deeper. It's not an intellectual stance or a pessimistic option. It is an existential, gut-wrenching soul anguish. The sweet chestnut individual cannot be persuaded or coaxed because they are far beyond the reach of human arguments or debates. Now let us contrast sweet chestnut with mustard. Mustard represents an endogenous depression. It is the classic black cloud that descends out of nowhere, completely independent of life circumstances. A person with an ideal life can suddenly fall into a heavy mustard gloom, and then, just as suddenly, it lifts. Sweet chestnut, by contrast, is almost always tied to a profound real life trial or a massive structural existential crisis. It is triggered when a person's real life structures, their marriage, their health, their lifelong belief system have utterly collapsed, forcing them to face the void. It does not lift randomly. It requires a deep spiritual rebirth. Finally, let us anchor this back to our previous module on elm. Elm, as you recall, is the temporary buckling of a naturally capable leader who has taken on too many external projects. The elm state is a crisis of capacity. The electrical transformer is throwing sparks because of an overload, but the structure is perfectly fine. Sweet chestnut is a crisis of identity and existence. It is not that you have too many emails or too many tasks. It's that your entire framework of meaning has dissolved. The power station isn't just throwing sparks, it has completely blacked out, and the old generator will never work again. Review this differential matrix carefully. Keep it on your clinic desk or memorize its lines. By isolating the root trigger and the primary sensation of the client, you ensure that you aren't merely treating the blanket symptom of sadness, but are instead target locking the exact emotional frequencies that require rebalancing. This is the hallmark of a master practitioner. When a client enters a sweet chestnut state, their language will reveal their internal reality. During your intake interview, listen intently. We must also read the language of the body. Somatically, the sweet chestnut state manifests as a total loss of physical tone. The posture is severely collapsed. The shoulders slump forward as if carrying a literal mountain, and the head is heavily bowed. The eyes are a major diagnostic giveaway. They feature a fixed, vacant, or glassy expression, looking right through you into an internal void. Their breathing is highly shallow, interrupted occasionally by a deep, hollow sigh that feels entirely devoid of relief. Their hands will often rest on their lap, completely open and turned upward, a universal gesture of absolute defeat and surrender. What triggers this profound state in real world clinical practice? The first major category is catastrophic loss. This occurs when an event completely wipes out the foundations of person's life. Examples include sudden, devastating bereavement, such as the loss of a child or a lifelong partner, or catastrophic financial and professional ruin, where an individual's entire career and legacy are erased overnight. When the external world shatters so violently that the individual cannot find a single remaining pillar of safety, the psyche plunges straight into the sweet chestnut void. The second major clinical trigger is chronic intractable illness. When a human being endures years of unremitting physical pain or a progressive degenerative diagnosis that steadily stripes away their independence, they eventually hit a wall. They reach a state of therapeutic exhaustion. They have tried every specialist, every alternative therapy, every medication, and every diet, yet the pain remains. The moment they realize that no physical cure is coming and they must face an agonizing reality completely unassisted, that is the precise moment sweet chestnut is required to protect the soul from breaking. The third category is purely spiritual or existential. This is the true dark night of the soul. It occurs when an individual's lifelong belief system, religion, or philosophical framework completely dissolves, leaving them with an existential void. They look at the universe and see only absolute meaninglessness and nihilism. This is not a pathology in the traditional sense. It's a painful, necessary developmental stage in advanced psychological evolution. The old, superficial ego identity must burn away so a deeper, authentic spiritual self can take its place. As practitioners, we must be highly alert to the masked sweet chestnut. Some individuals possess such an immense ingrained sense of duty or pride that they will continue to smile, show up for work, and cook dinner for their families out of automatic mechanical habit. On the surface, they look fine, but if you look closely, you will see a total absence of joy, spontaneity, or true emotional resonance behind that smile. Their performance of daily life is entirely robotic. If you ask them a deeply direct question about their internal world, the mask will momentarily slip, revealing an abyss of absolute exhaustion. To wrap this section on clinical profiling, utilize this intake checklist. If your client matches three or more of these parameters, sweet chestnut should immediately be considered a primary foundational remedy in their treatment bottle. By grounding your assessment in both verbal cues and somatic observations, you ensure absolute diagnostic accuracy. Let us now explore the beautiful redemptive phase of this module, the mechanics of positive transformation. When the liquid energy of sweet chestnut is introduced to a collapsed system, it acts like a drop of pure light falling into an abyss. It initiates a profound energetic shift, moving the individual out of a state of destruction and into a space of active spiritual reconstruction. It awakens an unbreakable, deep soul fortitude that the client did not even know they possessed, gently restoring hope to a completely barren psychological landscape. The first thing that happens under the influence of sweet chestnut is the dissolution of isolation. That thick, heavy, impenetrable boundary wall that cut the individual off from the universe begins to soften and dissolve. The client experiences a sudden, subtle realization that they are not completely alone in a dark void. They feel reconnected to the larger web of life, recognizing that their suffering is not a personal punishment, but rather a profoundly intense chapter of the shared human experience. This transformation is what we call the phoenix effect. In the negative state, the individual feels like their entire self is being destroyed. The sweet chestnut helps them realize that it is not their soul being destroyed. It is simply their old, limited ego identity and outdated coping mechanisms burning away. As they accept this death of the old self, they rise out of the ashes with a vastly expanded level of consciousness. The crucible of suffering yields a priceless gift, an inner strength so profound, grounded, and resilient that nothing in the external world will ever be able to shatter them again. As the remedy continues its work, it restores a profound sense of faith and trust. The individual shifts from agonizing, exhausting internal resistance to a state of peaceful surrender. They stop fighting the void and instead trust that the universe has not abandoned them. This is not a passive, weak surrender, it's a position of supreme spiritual power. They develop an internal light, an unshakable knowing that the sun is still behind the clouds and that their life path still holds profound meaning, beauty, and purpose. In the long term, Sweet Chestnut constructs an unshakable psychological fortitude. The strength it brings is not loud, rigid, or aggressive. It's deep, quiet, and infinitely flexible, much like the ancient sweet chestnut tree itself. Furthermore, individuals who have traveled through the sweet chestnut void and returned via this remedy become the world's greatest healers, mentors, and guides. They can sit with others who are in absolute despair without running away because they have stood in that exact fire themselves and know the way out. Take a moment to review this comparative summary of the before and after states. This chart represents the magnificent evolutionary journey a client undergoes. It shows why sweet chestnut is considered one of the most sacred and transformative catalysts in the Bach flower system, turning absolute psychological destruction into a triumphant spiritual rebirth. Let us dive into clinical mechanics of preparation and administration. To prepare a treatment bottle for a client, place 4 drops from the original sweet chestnut stock bottle into a 30 ml amber dropper bottle filled with high quality spring water and a small amount of brandy or apple cider vinegar as a preservative. For acute overwhelming panics or sudden drops into the void, utilize the glass method. Place 4 drops into a glass of water and have the client sip it continuously. For long-standing chronic existential states, ensure a strict minimum protocol of 4 drops 4 times a day. In moments of acute crisis, when a client is actively weeping from sheer unendurable pain or completely frozen in a panic of despair, the dosing frequency must be stepped up. Do not wait for the standard 4 times a day schedule. Administer the remedy every few minutes. If the client is unable to drink comfortably, place the drops directly on their tongue or rub them onto their pulse points, temples, and behind the ears. The liquid frequency absorbs transdermally, transdermally and works rapidly to stabilize a drowning psyche, bringing them back to a grounded baseline. When dealing with long-term treatment strategies for chronic existential despair, prepare your client for a multi-month journey. Despair that has taken years to solidify will not dissolve in 24 hours. As sweet chestnut begins to melt the frozen despair, you will often observe a layering phenomenon. The numbness will lift, and underneath it, the client may suddenly feel intense grief, anger, or fear. This is an excellent sign of clinical progress. It means the emotional waters are flowing again. Your role as a practitioner is to hold a steady, unshakable space as these layers reveal themselves. Let us explore clinical synergies. Combining remedies to create highly customized, High potency formulations. The most vital combination in cases of trauma is sweet chestnut paired with Star of Bethlehem. Star of Bethlehem is the master healer for neurological shock and deep grief. When paired together, sweet chestnut addresses the vast existential despair of the situation, while Star of Bethlehem works to soothe and seal the energetic shock of the trauma. Use this specific combination for clients who are dealing with sudden, devastating life upheavals. Another exceptional clinical pairing is sweet chestnut with olive. While sweet chestnut handles the spiritual agony of reaching the end of one's rope, olive addresses the literal, physical, and cellular exhaustion of the body. When a person has spent months or years in a state of high stress or illness, their physical battery is completely dead. This synergy ensures the holistic recovery. Sweet chestnut enters to restore the spiritual spark, while olive works systematically to rebuild the physical vitality and energy reserves. For high achievers, perfectionists, and intensely rigid individuals, look at pairing sweet chestnut with rock water. Rock water is for those who hold themselves to unyielding, impossibly high standards, completely repressing their own needs. Often it is this very rigidity that causes them to crash into a brick wall of despair. Combining these two remedies softens the hard, unyielding structures of the personality, allowing the grace of surrender to enter their life and preventing future structural collapses. It is critical to note sweet chestnut's relationship to the traditional rescue remedy or five-flower formula. The standard rescue formula contains rock water for terror, impatience for agitation, clematis for faintness, star of Bethlehem for shock, and cherry plum for the fear of losing control. Notice that it does not contain a remedy for absolute hopelessness or giving up. If your client is in an emergency situation, but their main symptom is a flat, hollow despair rather than a racing panic, you should always add sweet chestnut directly into the rescue remedy bottle to cover the existential void. Review this practitioner's dosing matrix. By matching the precise clinical presentation with the correct synergy and developmental strategy, you elevate your practice from simple experimentation to a master level prescribing. This completes our technical section on administration. Let us move toward our masterclass synthesis. As we approach the synthesis of this masterclass, let us revisit the grand theme of sweet chestnut. This remedy teaches us the ultimate spiritual truth about the transmutation of human suffering. It reminds us that reaching the end of our rope is not an existential error or a failure of will. It's a sacred space where the ego yields so that true wisdom can enter. Sweet chestnut acts as a guardian of the human spirit, ensuring that while the outer structures of our life may burn, our central divine core remains completely safe, protected, and poised for a spectacular rebirth. Let us look at a real world case study to anchor this completely. A 52-year-old corporate director came to clinic after experiencing a sudden massive career collapse and a painful divorce in the same month. He presented with the classic sweet chestnut markers, a silent hollow voice, a vacant gaze, and he flatly stated that universe has turned out the lights permanently. I put him on a strict protocol of sweet chestnut, olive for his deep physical exhaustion, and star of Bethlehem for the shock. Over a 12-week period, a profound transformation occurred. The dead numbness slowly melted away. giving way to tears and then to a quiet clarity. Today, he runs a non-profit consulting firm, reporting an unshakable internal peace and a meaning that he never once experienced during his high-flying corporate years. As practitioners, educators, and students of Dr. Bach's system, holding space for a sweet chestnut client is one of the highest privileges you will ever experience. It requires immense courage to look into that void with them and remain steady. But remember the profound botanical promise of Castanea sativa. Its brilliant golden white catkins burst forth late in the season, precisely when the rest of the world appears to have stopped blooming. Nature is telling us that no matter how deep, cold, or long the winter of the soul may feel, the dawn is inevitable. Light will always return. Thank you for joining me for this exhaustive masterclass module on Sweet Chestnut. I hope this deep dive into its botanical signatures, psychological profiles, and clinical application gives you the confidence to deploy this magnificent remedy in your practices. In next video, we will see next remedy from the group 6. Until next time, keep walking towards the light. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your experiences in the comments below. Thank you.